Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you these guys for coming to speak to us today a little bit about their companies. As John was saying, if you guys have any ideas that you're looking to launch or looking for any guidance, feel free to reach out to EVC. We can at least point you in the right direction. So don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to hand it over to Tyler.
All right, how you guys doing? I'm Tyler Wonke, co-founder and CEO of Innoblative. We're a medical device startup company that spun out of Northwestern, kind of first Feinberg and then Kellogg over the past couple of years. And I think what we're going to do is just kind of go and do like a little pitch presentation type thing to show you about our business, companies, and what we're working on in some way, shape, or form. And then there's going to be some questions and answers or something like that. So I'll get started. So Innoblative is a MedTech company focusing on the breast cancer space. And if you know something about breast cancer, it can either get diagnosed early or late. And if it's diagnosed early, you have a few options. You can either do a mastectomy, or you can do what's called breast conservation therapy. Take out the tumor and use a variety of methods to get any cancer that's left behind. So that's successful, but there's a few problems with the current standard of care. One is that about 1 in 4 patients needs a reoperation because we don't get all the tumor out every time. And this is what we call the margin problem. If you don't get all the tumor out, you have to go back in and do a whole nother reoperation to do it a week or a couple weeks later. The second problem is that we give radiation therapy to virtually all patients that get lumpectomy, even though a lot of them are benefiting from it, but we don't know which is which. So we give 5 to 7 weeks of daily radiation therapy of that patient coming back every single day for treatment. It costs more than the surgery itself, and there's a lot of side effects because it's radiation. It's no wonder why 1 in 5 patients quits or never starts the radiation therapy they were prescribed. So the whole field was trying to go more local and try to figure out how can we treat this more locally. For example, maybe localized radiation, etc. And that's where we came in and said, why don't we use a technology that is really good at treating locally, tissue locally, that does so in a short period of time, not weeks, and costs a fraction of what radiation costs. And by the way, doesn't even use radiation. So we proposed using radiofrequency-based ablation to treat the residual cancer after surgery. Our clinical partner, Suzanne Klimberg, piloted this study and was able to ablate the tumor bed of breast cancer patients and reduce the reoperation rate by 2/3. Her 5-year local recurrence of cancer coming back was only a few percent, right on par with radiation. And as an added benefit, the cosmetic outcome was excellent. In fact, the results of this study were so compelling that she started a 250-patient prospective multi-center trial that we're running year 4 of right now. And this data is not yet published, but it's even more exciting than the first study. So while this is all really encouraging, the truth is that Suzanne Klimberg and the researchers investigating this exciting new procedure did not have a technology to actually do this consistently every time. In fact, what they were doing was taking an existing technology and jerry-rigging it. So we at Northwestern, and now at Innoblative, have spun up the first and only cavitary radiofrequency ablation device designed for this procedure. So the way it works is it goes in after you take out the tumor. It uses saline-coupled bipolar RF energy to ablate or kill any residual cancer that's left behind. It does so in minutes instead of weeks for a fraction of the cost and without the use of radiation therapy. And as you can see, it gets a good fit and is user-friendly. So to protect this, we have 8 patents and a growing portfolio at that, with the first 2 coming from Northwestern University, and we continue to file frequently on new IP, and we're working with 2 top firms in radiofrequency ablation. The regulatory strategy is such that we're going for our US clearance by next year, and shortly thereafter our European clearance, CE mark. And perhaps the most exciting thing of all is the business model. It's a razor blades business model where we're selling our high margin razor blade with razor handles that already exist in operating rooms around the world. So it's really just that strategy. And as you can see, every time you do the procedure, the hospital would get a few $1,000s to cover the cost of the device. The surgeon would get a few $100s to cover their costs, and all the while the payer is saving $10,000+ by not paying for these reoperations and radiation therapy. Even at a low ASP for us of $2,000 per, there's about 85+% margins, so good margins and a lot of room, and that produces about an annual $500 million a year market in the United States, about $1 billion globally. So that's a little bit about the opportunity. This is the team that we've constructed to make this reality. I told you a little bit about myself. What you didn't know is I started out next door at the medical school and left after 2 years to go to Kellogg, where we incorporated the company and then spun it out after I graduated in 2015. Also worked for Medtronic and interned at Abbott. And the rest of the experience comes with my much older team counterparts, including Bob Rio, former Director of R&D Oncology at Boston Scientific, Annalisa Somera, our VP Quality Reg, who did this for a breast cancer device diagnostic, and Roberta Lee, a serial MedTech executive, formerly trained as a surgical oncologist. And we have a full board of directors, all investors and advisors. Advisors that you would hope, all the way from Suzanne Klimberg, the inventor herself, the procedure, all the way to a potentially familiar face, former CEO of Baxter, Harry Kramer, who's an advisor, investor, and mentor, and a whole team that gets the job done, including some full-time engineers, part-time finance and research people, a lot of them with Northwestern affiliation. So we've been able to show that this exciting new technology can work in computational models. We've been able to show that it can work on the bench in living animal models. And most recently, we've been able to show that it actually works in human breasts. So we've done all of that with under $2 million of financing. And we're raising right now our Series A of $2 to $3 million to finish development, get our US FDA clearance, get our CE mark, and do our first in vivo clinical study. That's innovative, and that's what we're doing to innovate the treatment of cancer. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jeff Bennett, the CEO of Higgy. Higgy is about a 4.5-year-old company that I helped write the original plan, and then joined by 18 months after we started the business as CEO. I was on the board for the first 18 months or so. Our mission is really to get individuals to take small, meaningful steps to create lasting habits and share that information with people they trust. And you'll see what our plan is and how to do that, because that's something that's a big challenge in the market today. And our vision as we go through this is really to transform the way the world accesses healthcare. And so we'll walk through that in a couple of slides here. So what's the state of the union in the United States on healthcare? 7 out of 10 deaths today each year are caused by chronic diseases. And chronic diseases account for 86% of the nation's healthcare costs. So if you look at some of this is just state by state, some of the issues. The purple's the worst, the red's next, and goes down to green if it shows up. Adult obesity, hypertension, diabetes, physical activity. Now look at the costs. Today, obesity and related diseases, 1 in 3 adults today are obese. $190 billion of costs for obesity and related diseases. Hypertension, 1 in 3 adults have hypertension and pre-hypertension, $46 billion of costs. Diabetes and pre-diabetes, 1 in 3 adults, again, you can see the trend, $322 billion. But as you get down and these things continue to progress, cardiovascular disease, $320 billion today in the United States. Estimated by 2030, it's $1.1 trillion. And Alzheimer's, $236 billion today, $1 trillion by 2050. This is the United States. It looks even more daunting when you look globally. Take this to another level, though. We spend trillions of dollars right now in healthcare, and a lot of this is on preventative, trying to prevent preventable diseases. A big issue with that is there isn't a good way to reach and engage and empower consumers early in this whole process. It's cost prohibitive today, and there's not an incentive for the caretaker, the provider, if you will, and it's also not easy for the consumer to do that. It shows even more when you get to lower income. So the graph on the far right there, we spend twice as much money on people that make less than $25,000 of household income as we do on people who make over $100,000 of household income. About the same population in this country. So you think there's 22% of the population who makes over $100,000 of household income. And we spend half as much money as people that are in the poverty range in this country. Also, we spend a lot of money on people obviously over 45 years old. So when you look at any solution that you create, you have to make sure that this solution actually can span across age groups and socioeconomic status. It can't just work for the 22-year-old marathon runner, which I once was, and now I'm the 46-year-old recovering from a stress fracture runner that didn't run a marathon for the first time in 23 years in Chicago. So when you look at this, let's think about everybody. Let's think about not only those that are engaged and ready to go, but those that aren't, and we have to reach them. Another important aspect, so this is from Medicare on the far left. So this is where we spend a lot of our money today in healthcare. So the top 5% in CMS, 50% of the cost, $70,000 per patient. So what we do today is we spend a lot of time and energy on those 5% of people. The real issue with that, which this study isn't disclosed, so I can't tell you the results of this, but I know this results, is it's not predictable today because the people that are here aren't staying here. And the real costs actually are in areas that we can't predict with the data that we have today. We can't just look back at claims data and figure out where our money's going to happen next year. You can't look at a patient and say, well, because you had this issue last year, you're going to have it next year. You need more information, and you need to get to patients and get regular information from them, but it's cost prohibitive. Just think if we go to 1 in 3, say 100 million Americans, we want them all to just do a preventative screening once a year, it's $10 billion. It's a lot of money, right? We can't reach those people effectively. So what did Higgy do? First, over the last 4 years, we built out the largest reach in the world. There's over 10,000 connected health stations across the country. We're now moving internationally. We'll be within 6 miles of 85% of the population of Canada. We're already that way in the United States with our rollout. So we provide a very accessible, affordable, convenient way to reach individuals. We're now launching off a platform that enables engagement for those individuals, providers, payers, other organizations that want to use the data that you can get on a regular basis to try to incent individuals to change their behavior. Because today, again, it's not easy to access that data for large percentages of the population. And the key is reaching people earlier, not waiting until they become one of the 5%, reaching them earlier. And all this gets driven into data insights that allow for earlier action. So this is what our network looks like in the United States. We've had 10% of the population of this country use this platform. We've done over 175 million tests, tracked 110 million miles, so that's the network we have today. What's the theory behind what we're doing? Get to people to know their numbers. The numbers include not only your outcomes information, but the food that you're eating, fitness, treatment adherence, education, and then connect with people that you trust in the community. And this is a recent study that we published at the American Heart Association Hypertension Conference, in which we use these key elements of messaging, social influence, financial incentives, and measurement of your information. And we showed that we could increase engagement, improve the health of the population, and more importantly, when you remove the incentive, we actually were able to maintain the habit formation after time went on. And then most importantly is we connected with the hardest to reach population, males above 55 and older. An element is this wasn't done through a payer, this wasn't done through an employer, right? This was done through influencers, which is important because again, you think about a big significant portion of the population that costs money today aren't going through your traditional sort of employee wellness programs and other organizations that reach those individuals. To get this down to a personal level, this is an example of what you can do when you can make healthcare accessible. A lady was walking through an Albertsons. She sat down at a blood pressure machine, spur of the moment decision, small font, but I'll read it to you. She was 9 months pregnant, as mentioned. 178 or 125 was her blood pressure reading. We're an FDA Class 2 device, so we can't diagnose or tell her what to do. We did fight the FDA to get them to allow us to put a message that the American Heart Association would recommend someone with that sort of reading seek medical advice. She didn't do that immediately. She went back to work, talked to her nurse. Her nurse took the reading, same exact reading. Talked to her doctor, emergency room. She was on the verge of a seizure. they induced, both her and her son are alive. So that was a spur of the moment thing. How do we make that habit more frequent for everybody? Another story, which isn't on the slide, but I'll speak to it, it's personal. My nanny right now is suffering from significant issues because of 15 years of hypertension. Never knew that she had hypertension. She basically had to retire. Her brain looks like she's 70 and she's 35 years old. 15 years of hypertension, what it does to you. So these are things that we can prevent if we can get people access into screenings. I'm sure I can get this to work. So now you take that one story. And this is last year across the United States. So we do about 50 million screenings, 40 to 50 million screenings a year. This is about 1.5 million people that have a similar reading as that lady that sat in the Albertsons. And again, this is a small percentage of the population today that uses this platform. As we work through the marketing of this program next year, we expect the number of usage across this platform to grow significantly. But everything in deep red is significant issues. You'll see as the year goes on, we lit up HEB in Texas. You'll see the issues of what's happening down there with obesity and diabetes. It's a significant issue. The map doesn't lie. And this is what the information tells us. So now how we take this data and make it actionable for healthcare professionals. So this slide shows here is blood pressure on the vertical axis. A is a no blood pressure reading. B is normal. F is a reading that would indicate a hypertensive diagnosis if you went to the doctor and had a similar reading. This is your weight test. So no weight test to a BMI above 40. Everyone in this column should be going to the emergency room, right? Everyone in this column and in here has high risk of diabetes. Be talking to the bariatric surgeons. How do we get these people to come in and then connect these people back with local healthcare systems? So part of our strategy is now to go work with healthcare systems and make sure that a consumer can go connect, or a payer or healthcare system can send their individuals to do this cost effectively. And then even within this, you could route them to, for example, a Wegmans, where a lab result can be done immediately, right? So it makes it very convenient, very actionable. You get the person to the right doctor's appointment right away without them going undiagnosed until it's too late. So our strategy, innovations in self-screening, innovations in health engagement. So on this level today, we're screening for things like blood pressure, pulse, weight, but there's new technologies coming out. We have a 3x3 footprint across 10,000 locations and growing. Tests are coming out, and we're working on tests today that look into the eye and can screen for cognitive issues, screen for diabetes, the risk of diabetes, all non-invasively, to not, again, diagnose, but to give you a risk factor, to triage you, to say, okay, looks like this number's relatively good, or you should be getting an appointment with the doctor tomorrow, right? Where are you along that mechanism? We don't have to build those technologies. There's innovative people that are building these devices. What we have is a network that we've spent a decent amount of money on, like a telecom network, like a cell phone network, to be able to plug any of those devices or sensors in as they come out. And then on this vertical axis, it's innovations in health engagement. So how do we bring engagement to people that have influence and trust in the community? Because if you're going to reach those hard-to-reach populations, you're not going to reach them through the president or the head of Health and Human Services. If you want to reach someone in an underserved population, it might be the minister, right? Or it could be the barber, right? So how do you find people that can engage them? And we built out tools that allow for all influencers of people to engage their consumers over their community. Thank you.
Hi. This is working? No. It's on. This is good. Thank you. Hello, my name is Alexei Volodnov. I am the co-founder of Surgical Innovation Associates, and we are, as you'll see, operating in the breast cancer space as well, though addressing a little bit of a different problem that happens after treatment. So, no one really needs to be convinced that breast cancer is a big problem, not only in America, but worldwide. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with this disease in their lifetime. Now, a lot of the issues come up not only
with respect to the diagnosis and the potential lethality of the disease, but with respect to the treatment options. So of the 240,000 women who were diagnosed with breast cancer last year in the US and Canada, about half of them underwent mastectomy for definitive treatment of that disease. Now, this can be obviously not only a physically, but also an emotionally devastating procedure to undergo. Now, fortunately, in the US and Canada, again, not internationally, the vast majority of these women receive some kind of breast reconstruction to address that emotional burden in addition to the physical burden. Now, the way that this is typically done here is with a prosthetic device, an implant, like you would think of for breast augmentation. So a mastectomy removes the breast tissue, and now what you're looking at is the cross-section of the skin that contained the breast, as well as the chest muscles underlying where the breast tissue used to be, and then the ribs that are underlying those muscles. The reconstructive surgeon then cuts and lifts up the pectoralis muscle, that chest muscle that you use for bench pressing and all those related activities. An implant is placed under that to be protected and supported. Now the problem is that you have a gap, right? So you're trying to recreate the size of a breast mound under a piece of muscle that never held that much volume. So that gap is filled with a sheet of some kind of mesh. And that can be a biologic or synthetic material that I'll talk more about in a second. But placing a graft of some sort in that position allows for a more natural cosmetic appearance and a breast-shaped inner envelope that coincides with that skin that's left over. Now, the most commonly used material today, about 80% of the time, is called acellular dermal matrix. It's a biologic mesh. You take human skin from a cadaver, you take the cells away, sterilize it to the extent that you can, although that sterility is unfortunately debatable, and then you package it and you sell it in these sheets of 8 by 16 centimeters. This has three problems that are associated with it. One is cost. As you can imagine, the cost of acquiring actual human tissue and then processing that tissue to the extent that it's safe for human use is prohibitive in many respects. So a reconstructive surgery like the one you saw might only be $20,000, but the cost of a single wisp of tissue about that big is $5,000. That's about 5 times the cost of the actual implant that's being used, so ridiculous. The second issue is that when you talk about use of cadaveric material from humans, that is unacceptable to regulatory bodies outside of the US and Canada. And so patients in every other country don't even have access to what is considered the gold standard here in the US. And the third issue is quality. This is kind of the most important to patients and surgeons, and this is what lack of quality looks like in this context. This is a picture of an infected breast that has been reconstructed. We see complications like this about 10% more often. And you can see that area of redness that's traced in pen is actually the exact area that you might remember from the animation in the last slide where that piece of mesh is inserted. So this is a clear example of a mesh causing an infection, which requires this patient, who a year after her surgery should by all rights have the episode behind her, to go back into the operating room, wash out that pocket, remove that implant, replace it with something else, and potentially replace it with another piece of infection-causing mesh. Now, we at Surgical Innovation Associates have reappropriated a tried and true surgical material called polydioxanone to create a polydioxanone tissue matrix, a synthetic mesh that can serve the same purpose but without those 3 problems that I alluded to. At the top left, you can see an example of actually what is one of our early prototypes. It's simply a knit reappropriation of a material that's used in sutures every day all over the world. Now, in terms of cost, we can offer this, and we'll get to margins in a minute, but we can offer this at a price point of $1,000 to $1,500, so about 1/3 the cost of that biologic alternative, because we don't have the fixed cost of acquiring and processing any kind of tissue. That translates to over $500,000 in material cost savings and a 15% higher margin to an institution like Northwestern just down the street that might do a couple hundred of these procedures per year. In terms of access, as I alluded to, polydioxanone is basically absorbable suture. So if you've ever had stitches that did not need to be removed, you probably had polydioxanone in your body. It's used every day by surgeons all over the world. They're comfortable with it and with its biocompatibility. And that kind of gets to the last issue of quality. Now, on the right, you can see a scanning electron microscope picture of human tissue, which looks like a nice sponge, which is actually what we've heard from surgeons when talking about it. It's a bacterial sponge. once that's infected, it provides a really good kind of milieu, a good environment for growth and thriving of those bacteria. Whereas on the left, you have a scanning electron microscope picture of the material we use. The polydioxanone has that smooth surface even at that level, which is relatively resistant to bacterial adhesion to prevent infections like the one you saw. Now, I alluded to the margins earlier, so even at an average price of $1,500 that saved all that money to the payer and to the provider, we can still net 60% on this, with gross margins of over 90% at scale production. What this translates to in the 240,000 reconstruction procedures that we see worldwide on an annual basis is a little over $500 million. The exciting thing about that, though, is because this procedure itself is a relatively recent innovation in the scheme of plastic surgery as a whole, this is a high growth market, almost 19% compound annual growth rate projected in the next 5 years. So where are we as a company? With respect to intellectual property, we have one issued patent under exclusive license from INVO, which is Northwestern's tech transfer office. Regulatory, you heard a little bit about 510K earlier from both other teams actually, and we are in the same pathway, a Class 2 device, with, fortunately for us, many mesh products, which I'm sure you've heard of in some contexts for hernia and other applications, who have paved the way from a regulatory perspective for us. So it's pretty well known what we need to do, how we need to do it to attain that clearance. And with respect to R&D, we now have a prototype that's actually a generation past the one that was pictured, which I apologize for, that was reviewed and approved by some of the key opinion leaders that are on our advisory board in our network in this space specifically. Now, the reason that this niche within a broader kind of reconstructive or synthetic mesh market as a whole is appealing is because people see the potential for something to dethrone that human tissue that's kind of being used as a historical relic more than a gold standard that actually has real value in this setting. And an example of that excitement in the marketplace is Allergan's acquisition of Serica, which was doing a very similar thing about 5 years ago, but with a synthetic material that had some issues that they didn't foresee. Well, they didn't foresee, but a lot of surgeons foresaw. In any case, about 1 year after FDA acquisition, they were acquired pre-revenue for almost $100 million. And there are a lot of people operating in this space, a lot of companies operating in this space like those at left that could be strategic partners, licensing partners, or even acquirers for us down the line. Now, right now we have a little over $300,000 of what will be a $630,000 seed round in the bank. And this is not only to finalize our product development, which will actually happen next month, but to then put it in animals, begin the testing for regulatory clearance, and ultimately get FDA clearance by the end of next year. With that, as you can imagine, it's just pure kind of unit quantity-driven sales model. These are single-use implantable devices, and so with the unit sales that we're projecting, even from just the adoption in a couple centers in the US, which again do hundreds of these procedures per year, we could be breaking over $1 million in quarterly revenue by the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. It's a small team, which is why that seed round raise gets us so far. It's myself and Todd, who's right here in the audience, my esteemed colleague and only other full-time employee, and a board of advisors from both a business respect and a clinical perspective who have been really helpful guides so far, and especially as we execute on the FDA kind of regulatory pathway we have in front of us, we'll continue to leverage in order to drive adoption and think about issues like licensing opportunities. That is it. Thank you.
So if anybody has any questions, we can do some question and answer now.
Yeah, this is just for all of you. What was your light bulb moment when you decided that this was something that you needed to pursue and create a company around it? It wasn't just an idea of many ideas you probably had before you came to this conclusion conclusion of creating a company and creating a business around it?
I do.
Okay.
So I'll give you two answers to that. First, when we created the business, I was, managing director of Merrick Ventures, which was an investment firm in Chicago. So this was two of our big theses of how we're going to try to transform healthcare, broadly speaking. One was in the imaging space, and we saw imaging and pathology, and then access to healthcare around biometrics being a strong combination. So it was an overall thesis that we threw together. We invested in two different ways. One, we took a company called Merge Healthcare, and we bought into that. It was struggling in 2008, and we bought half of it for an enterprise value of around $18 million. And then we started this company about a year later. Since the thought of writing the plans and ideas behind it, and then kicked it off in early 2012 when we found the right CEO to kind of kick off and run that. But the thesis behind the business, as we wrote it, came back to probably when I was 11 years old, because my dad had his first heart attack in probably June 13th or something like that, 1982, and I was 11, he was 42. My uncle, his brother, died 9 days later with a massive heart attack, right? So my dad lived 30 more years with 4 open heart surgeries, 12 angioplasties, 60 angiograms, because everyone in the community got around him. When you talk about community, his doctor was important, but his pharmacist was actually even more important. 2 years after my dad passed away, I went and talked to the pharmacist because I burned my hand in the grill at my mom's house at the time, and he knew about more. This guy at 8:30 at night knew more about my father than I did. So the pharmacist, his secretary, the person at rehab who held them up every day, the class, because my dad wasn't leaving school, he was a professor, and said, hey, we're not going to start until you show up. So part of that is, how do you find those people in the community to make that work? Because a doctor can't do it. My wife's a doctor, she's an OB-GYN up at North Shore. I mean, doctors see you twice a year, 4 times a year, once a year. That's not going to sustain engagement over time. How do we find those other influencers? So as we thought about this, I just went back to my life, and we kept my dad alive for 30 years, even though he had a lot of problems, and had a very productive life, and then passed away at 72.
That's a neat story, by the way. I've never heard that. That's why I wanted you to go first. I was curious.
Yeah.
But very neat. So so Innoblatives kind of got its start. That's what you're asking. Sort of, how did you come up with it? And I can't take full credit for the original idea, of course. But I was in medical school here, as mentioned, and there was a program that they were starting called the Center for Device Development, and it was very similar to Stanford's biodesign program, if you know about that program. The idea being, try to put some surgical residents or doctors of some sort together with engineers, have them go to the clinics, have them go into the operating rooms and actually find problems to be solved. So coming at it that way, biodesign is one of the terms for this process, right? And so they were starting that program at Northwestern, and it turns out a resident who piloted that whole study was at Kellogg, full-time, triple M actually, and he was starting this program while going to Kellogg. And I was bored in medical school, just doing that all day, so I would come here actually at night and take Kellogg classes. And one of the classes I met him, and after doing a case competition and having a few too many beers with him, we became friends. And he said, look, I have this idea, this device, I want you to help me work on it and start a company, etc. So I started working on it as a medical student, and it was sort of this idea where, you had some smart surgeons come up with this brilliant solution to a problem, and then I was able to sort of join and help take it from an idea on a napkin almost to more intellectual property, a working prototype, and then we actually incorporated the company while at Kellogg and spun it out. So sort of an interesting story, but it goes to show, I guess, from that, the energy and the community around entrepreneurship here really going to start this, because I remember it was like in the spring of 2013, and we had just literally they just literally had an email come out about this big Rice business plan competition. Do you guys know about it? Rice business plan competition? It's like the biggest one in the world. I think it's a couple $1 million a year they give out now in like grants and prizes and funding. And I remember there was 2 Northwestern teams in a picture with just like 9 checks totaling like over $1 million, well over $1 million, 2 Northwestern companies. I thought that is so cool. Like 2, and one of them is Brightseed, surgical medical device company. One of them is Samir's company. What is it? Oh yeah, Signed Out, the energy company. I thought that was so cool, like right out of Northwestern. So it was actually a few weeks later that we ended up getting our idea funded with grant funding, and my surgeon colleague was graduating from Triple M and had to go back and be a doctor. So it was pretty much this thing was going to die in the vine, or something was going to happen. So I left to start the company. But anyways, that's how we got it started right here.
Yes, Surgical Innovation Associates used to be called Surgenet, which you may or may not have heard that term before from EVC or from other things in the last year. But basically, the reason it was called Surgenet was because it was a single product. It wasn't a company, really. The patent that I mentioned was issued in 2014, at which time I was a medical student that was doing a lot of research in this particular field under John Kim, just down the street at NMH. He is, I mean, not only one of the best and most well-respected surgeons in the field, but extremely forward-thinking, innovative. I think this was his 15th patent or something, but one that he was particularly excited about, and I think only the second one that he had even wanted to pursue as like a real endeavor, rather than kind of intellectual property that was there to perhaps be licensed from Northwestern or something. So it was kind of in the context of that interest in the field, trust in this guy, the inventor, and the really kind of opinion leader in this field, who presented me with an opportunity to partner with him to actually take this from an idea to a real thing that's in the marketplace, that's providing value in this setting that I talked a little bit about. Now, that was probably back in 2014 or something, right around the time the patent was issued. After that, kind of the way it happened was fairly organic. So I had wanted to go, like Tyler, to Kellogg, because you'll find, if you ever speak to someone that has been through medical school, that it's a little bit, what's the word? Stifling is a good word. A little bit single-minded. It's good. It's good for the end goal, but not necessarily for the pursuit itself. So go to Kellogg, where all these cool things are happening, where all these companies are being built, and all of this knowledge is being exchanged. That was something I wanted to be a part of, and so I joined the MD MBA program after my 3rd year of medical school. Over the course of that year, I heard about all these awesome Kellogg companies, that had gone to Rice Business Plan competition and won the Women's Healthcare Prize, for example, or gone to Texas for their VLIC, and rang the bell at NASDAQ because they won that competition. And I thought, oh, maybe this is a good place to actually get involved in the community with this concept that's already kind of bubbling on the side as I'm taking classes. And so it was over the course of my time at Kellogg that we got involved in some business management competitions, ended up going to Rice as well, obviously participating in NUVC right here a few months ago, and participating in a few experiential learning classes, not only as a student, but as a client, so to speak. You'll see some of those where you kind of work on an actual company, budding, or sometimes a big company. And that's where I met Todd. And so Todd had significant experience in industry, a significant ability to kind of see, have a strategic vision and kind of see where things are going. And because of that strategic vision, obviously saw that this was going places. So the two of us, along with actually 1 or 2 other Kellogg MDs, MBAs, and MD MBAs, did these business plan competitions, and eventually people went and got jobs and went to those jobs, went back to school. But the 2 of us remain as the people that are actually going to not let this die on the vine, as Tyler alluded to, but actually make it a reality and even build the future products other than this breast mesh product that we've got going.
Okay. I've
Yeah, good question. So I pulled out, I could probably have 50 slides. Justin probably seen 50. A third of our population actually is hypertensive, a third of it's prehypertensive, a third of it's normal, a third of it's obese, broadly speaking, 34% or whatever, a third of it's overweight, and a third of it's normal weight as far as that goes. So we actually see a fairly good distribution of users, even on the bell curve of young to old, so it matches fairly well. To the point of our registered users, a hypertensive user of registered users are using it 2.7 times a month. And obese users are using it 2.2 times a month or so. So I think right now we have the early adopters, to be honest, and part of this is now you have to get this to organizations that have the interest of using the solutions, the platform, to provide incentives for those that aren't motivated, and to create that behavior change. So that's really the next phase of what we're doing in this process, is going beyond the early adopters, if you will, and reaching those individuals. But right now, the sicker patients are or they say that, if you want to say that people are obese and hypertensive are the more active users, which is unique in a lot of wellness programs. Because you go to a lot of employee wellness programs, it's me when I was 25 years old, right, running along and running 6-minute miles along the lakefront, having fun, that we're knocking out of the ballpark with employee wellness programs. So we're actually seeing a little different.
This is Jag. Thanks, guys, for sharing your stories. I've got a question for Tyler and Melissa. So when you guys started working, taking this idea and then started to actually make a commercial product, how did you guys look at funding? I mean, did you guys use the funding from the university to start, prototyping these devices, or did you actually raise some money from outside investors?
So maybe I'll start. I think we have maybe somewhat similar paths, but I can kind of go through our whole funding trajectory pretty quick. But we actually started, and I literally called my mom and said I'm dropping out of medical school when we had $5,000 in the bank. So think about that. We got a $5,000 grant, which is nothing, and and that seemed to be enough at the time. I was a couple $100,000 in debt. So I don't know how the math made sense there, but we actually found that there's a lot of these neat non-dilutive funding mechanisms coming about for startup companies, particularly university-based startup companies. And so the program that we did is now called the VentureWell E-Team program. And it's funded mostly by the Lemelson Foundation, who was like a famous inventor out on the East Coast. They're mostly out of Boston area. And they have this neat program where if they like what you're doing, mostly in the clean tech space and healthcare space, they'll fund an initial $5,000, and then I think another 20 grand, and then they can tack on another 50, another 50,000, and maybe another 50,000 through another mechanism. So it's not a lot of money, but like when you're in university and you're not having to do anything else for the business, that's like a nice little amount of play money to do some prototyping or do something else with your business, etc. And so that was really our first play, and that's what led me to go to Kellogg. Was okay, we have some money and a path to get more non-dilutive funding and all these other things, and it was enough for me to go to Kellogg. And then when at Kellogg, we were able to take advantage of a lot of interesting programs that really helped us fundraise early on before we took on any investor money, including the business plan circuit, which Alexa kind of went over well. But there's this whole circuit. Do you guys, who knows about the business plan circuit? You guys don't know about it? There's this whole circuit, right? It's like over the course of a year, it mostly ramps up in January, February, March, I think, and then it kind of goes to the end of the year, where you can go and pitch your idea and literally just win either cash as like a prize or investment. There's investors there, and they'll maybe their prize is $100,000 investment in your company. And so this is what these Northwestern companies the year prior to me won 1.1 or 1.2 million in combination of cash prize and investment in these competitions. So I mean, that's real money to get a company up and running, right? I mean, especially when you're a student, you don't have a lot of other expenses for the company. And so we did that, and we over the course of the year did that and won about somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 in cash. And actually, we were just all cash. We didn't take on any dilutive component to it. So it was just a couple $100,000 in cash. We're all students. And that was like enough to really like bring on a first full-time employee, do some advanced prototyping with a third party, get the device on track, and And there's a couple other things too. Zelle program was really helpful. There's a couple other interesting things, but there's all sorts of neat non-dilutive funding opportunities that you can get it up and running just through the university. And with that sort of traction, I think it was at the end of the business plan circuit, we had won like, I don't know, 150 grand or something like that by that point in time. By that point in time, we had enough investors who we were talking to, angels mostly, who were interested, that we were able to open up a round and start getting in, you know, a couple $100,000 in investment, and then that round ended up, I think, being like $1.1 million for that first little, you know, or first note round of financing, and then we were able to go and kind of go to the next layer of investment. So it's sort of neat. There's all sorts of opportunities to get yourself up and running and show that this could be something or not early on, and then jump into the investment world. Maybe one other quick thing on that is there's a lot of non-dilutive funding out there from the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, etc. We just got our first National Science Foundation STTR grant, so it's like $250,000 in non-dilutive funding from our government for a small business. It's crazy, and the phase twos of these things are like can be like $750 to $1.5 million. I mean, there's some serious non-dilutive financing to get a company up and running if you fit the bill for it.
Indeed, there's some gold in those hills. So I think that our pathway was pretty well explained by Tyler. So I'm just kidding. Yeah, the business plan competition circuit, it is a great opportunity, I think, not only to win free money, but to understand what people are going to be asking you, what they're going to be looking for. I mean, they're not, some of them, they're less than worth going to. Others, though, like Rice, and like I imagine a couple of the other, like VLIC turned into a Texas company-only competition our year, unfortunately, so we couldn't participate. But the bigger ones, like those, have real investors there. And so when you go in and you're there with your PowerPoint that you made, you know, based on what you learned presenting to people over the course of an academic education, at least in my case, they're asking you real questions, and you better be prepared to answer them, and you better be prepared to present the opportunity in a concise and interesting way to them. And so it's a good proving ground to get a feel for whether you even have something that is going to get real investors to put money in, or even if it's not that damning a decision of like a yes or no, at least whether you're on the right track as far as presenting that idea to investors. So before you ever get in front of someone who you're asking, you know, 300 grand of, you get in front of these people who give you like in-depth feedback sheets, basically saying this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong. So I would definitely encourage like pursuit of that in the early stages as you're getting up and running. And then from there, I don't know, do you guys ever see, it's okay. There's like a movie analogy that I make for fundraising. I'll just go ahead and make it. We're being recorded right now, right?
Make it.
All right, I'll go ahead and make it. So I don't know if you guys ever see like kind of action martial arts kind of movies. So you see, on one hand you have like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? Super beautiful choreography, all this like dance-like fighting where the good guy and the bad guy are, you know, it's like a ballet and everything's beautiful, and the good guy makes like expert moves, and then like the fight is won, right? I think that going to initially starting up, that's how I thought fundraising goes, right? And then how many of you guys have seen a movie called Eastern Promises with Viggo Mortensen? That's probably not a good analogy because it's like so like underwatched, but I can't think of a better one. There's a good sauna scene. If you just Google like Eastern Promises sauna fight, you get into fundraising and you see actually that's how it is. It's not like a beautiful choreographed dance at the end of which you get like $1.5 million. It is like a series of like trudging through meeting after meeting, presentation after presentation, like making little tweaks here, answering questions a little differently there, and no matter what happens, as long as you walk out of that sauna at the end and you kind of did well for yourself. So do watch that video because it will be demonstrative of our experience thus far. I guess, and that's also, there's like a good message in that. It's like, don't be discouraged. You know, it's not, it doesn't have to be like a beautiful thing where you give one pitch and then someone writes you $1 million in convertible notes or whatever. It's like a struggle, but just get it done. You know.
Yeah, so I'm not going to the gym and spa with you tomorrow. I'm just gonna turn that down now.
Manicure only.
Hi, so I'm a first-year medical student, and I'd like to ask you guys, what resources did you find as a medical student that were useful to your success and exploration of the field?
You can take that.
I know Tyler mentioned something, but I forgot what he said earlier.
You know what? And there's not as many resources, is my understanding, at the medical school here to do a lot of stuff. It's kind of a work in progress. There is some cool stuff happening though. I think there's some programs in development. There's a guy whose like new job is to help like startup companies like at Feinberg, I believe. So there's some cool things, but it's nothing like that's available at Kellogg. I mean, it's just there's a lot of stuff there. So probably the best thing you can do is go to the Office of Admissions and ask about the MD MBA program. That's probably the best thing you can do for yourself. I think that's a net present value that we all can agree is a lot more positive. But one of the best ways is talking to guys like Alexei, and there's all these guys and people who just know the opportunities. Maybe they went to Kellogg or whatever, and there's a lot of cool, I think that's the better route to go. I'm trying to think of honestly like something at Feinberg specifically for a program for this, other than education, because I know they're spending a lot more time now educating people about business issues and stuff in school, but there's not quite as much I think as if you go to Kellogg and there's just every class or club or something like that as some way for you to get involved and learn about venture from the investment side or entrepreneurship side or something. I don't know, what would your wife think?
No comment. I'm not gonna say that. One thing also, you might want to go over to Northwestern. Like Lyle Berkowitz is over at Northwestern, and he does a lot of stuff in innovation. So if you walk over and talk to him, and he can plug you into ideas. Some of that is investing in a lot of companies. So if you have passions around that, I would just go find Lyle. If you don't have his contact, I can make an introduction or something like that. That's my best suggestion, I think, in this area.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I didn't overlook that, and we both have co-founders who are, surgeons at Northwestern. So if there's one thing, there is a lot of really good, I think, ideas for at least like our side of the space, medical devices. I think good stuff for health IT side of things as well. There's all sorts of good ideas out there. Part of it is just connecting it all and saying, is this a good idea that is worth starting a company around? And that's a little bit tougher question. I don't know, do you have anything else?
No, not in particular. I would echo the human capital point of that's the best thing that the medical school provides. You are working with the best of the best in their field, and so if they have a good idea or you have an idea that you want to know, whether it's good, those are the kinds of connections that will help you determine whether you've got something that's worth starting a business on. If we're talking about medical device, for example. I can't speak so much to IT. There's probably less litmus testing with a clinician about that, but with device, it's a very good thing.
You know what, let me just jump in before I forget to say that there is a lot of really good resources in the city of Chicago to get involved with that are kind of affiliated with Northwestern, but their own thing. One is Matter. I don't know if you guys do you do anything with Matter?
It's kind of busy, but yeah.
Yeah. So Matter is like I think it's fair to say now it's kind of the epicenter of life science entrepreneurship. That's medical devices, biotech, health IT for all of Chicagoland, and probably now becoming more like a Midwest thing. And so this thing is this incubator, if you can call it that loosely, is like not even 2 years old, and they already have 140 portfolio companies, Innovative included. You guys included?
I don't know if they count.
We're post program.
We're in.
Okay. You will. You guys are a partner or something? Something. Anyways.
You know them really well. We've just been a lot of things.
They get everybody involved. But it is a really cool, really amazing place. If you could know about 1871, which is like the tech incubator in town, in the merchandise matter is like the life science version of that, and it's literally right down the hall on the 12th floor of the merchandise mart. So that's a really cool place to go and just check out what's going on in innovation in the life science space. Highly recommend it.
One thing Lyle definitely is more in the healthcare IT, but you want to find someone like him who makes investments, is really plugged in across the country, and there's med device guys like that too, because like my wife's an example, she's a doctor, she loves treating patients and taking care of patients. She might say it's a great idea, but she knows nothing about the business aspects of doing something with it. So clinicians might say, well, it's a great idea, that's really cool, but then the question is it really a good business opportunity? You know, what else is out in the market? What are the other barriers? And you have to make sure you get to someone that not only understands the technical aspects, the clinical aspects, but also the business and who could acquire the business, because most of these things aren't going to ever go to market. They're going to get bought by someone, and who they're going to get bought by, putting the right advisors on your board, getting the right connections right up front sets you up so that they're looking at you versus somebody else and helping you make that transition to, once you prove the product, to get it into a larger company that can scale it globally.
Thanks.
For the guys and girls on your teams who did not have MDs or medical backgrounds, like core business backgrounds, what sort of skill sets or backgrounds do you think were the most helpful, whether it's learning how to price a product or whether they really knew a lot about like thinking a biotech company or something like that?
I'm married a doctor. No. I think a lot of it comes down to, if you're talking about biotech, I'll let these guys speak to that better than myself, but I went into the business in telecom the same way. In that situation, it was creating the right rigor around market dynamics and looking at the market opportunity, understanding the customer segmentation, which are the right customers for us to go after, how much should we invest in different areas. So thinking about the core business stuff that you would learn in business school, because I didn't know the first thing about how to build a semiconductor that would go in a cell phone and allow someone to communicate like it does today. And that's what I was doing the day I got out of business school, which think about like medical school versus Kellogg. I went from Kellogg to work with these engineers that were basically building the chipsets that were running these phones. It's really technical stuff, not so fun. It's very so complex. But what I provided with them is taking that technology and making sure we're focusing on the right things, looking at the customers and markets behind it. So that's what I'd say on the device side of things, because you're not going to be the expert on the clinical side of things. You have to take it from the clinicians that are going to be experts in this and figure out what are the right markets, what are the right decisions, and where to focus. On our side of the business, honestly, a lot of the things that we're trying to do isn't really that clinical in nature. I mean, the question is how do you engage someone? And honestly, engagement in healthcare is a huge issue, and that's why we have all these preventative issues that are costing us 80% of the money in healthcare, because we're not engaging consumers in the right way. We're not figuring out the right people that can get to those people. So there, it's you can look at psychiatrists. It's like think about how do you get to the right person that has the right influence. So you have to look at the different aspects of again, segmentation, but then how do you get the right message to the right audience, to the right people to get someone to do something. So I can take your marketing skills on that.
I think there's a base skill set that is very useful, and that is just one, not of any particular business functionality, but just an ability to, you could call it project management, an ability to think methodically in an organized way through something. How much money are we actually going to need given this information, or what information do we need to get that number, because you have to be prepared early on to justify everything that you're doing with the money, the precious money that's being given to you. If there's a particular business function other than the kind of clinically relevant elements in med device, I would be interested to know what Tyler thinks, but I would say marketing, to that latter point of Jeff's, in the broad sense of everything from how do you price a product, which you mentioned, how big are different markets, what are the key differentiators going to be clinically, because I think certainly Inablative and SIA both have very close competition in our spaces. So if you take as a given that we are clinically superior, how do we convey that to drive adoption? There's actually some really good healthcare marketing classes at Kellogg that I would recommend as an aside. But I think true marketing functions in general, in that sense of, really everything to do with marketing is the other kind of thing that early on at least is super valuable, because it's a lot of what you talk about even in like early pitches, like how are you going to convince a surgeon to buy this, or why are you pursuing breast reconstruction and not hernia repair, or things like this.
Yeah, maybe the only other thing I'll say is like an early stage company is like everyone does a lot of different things at our company, and we have like a lot of engineers, but from the business side, like there's not too many people like just from that side in our company. But one of my teammates is also a Kellogg guy. We actually met there, and he's a former JP Morgan guy who just had a good breadth of experience, kind of in the venture side of things, and also at JP and doing like a variety of things. So he's at our company. He's like the one other business guy except for me, I think. And the one thing that you have to be good at, I think, in an early stage company like us, rather than a slightly later stage one, is doing just literally like you have to be good at a lot of things. You have to be a jack of all trades, essentially. And so if that's exciting, like I know that there's a need for business people to go and help like join these early stage startups. Like a lot of my friends' companies or companies I know of at Matter, where they have a great technical co-founder. And this is like the classic thing you'll find a lot of times for med device or et cetera. Great technical co-founder. They're a PhD, top of their field, or MD, top of their field, and they have this great invention, but they don't know anything about the business. This is probably like your wife's next invention. This is the great idea. Well, a lot of times you find this classic combo where there's a great technical founder and they need somebody to take over the business side. And so there's a real opportunity there. And this is really kind of more of Alexia and me. Like we're actually not the clinical people on our teams really. That's not the role we're playing. We're playing the business role. So if you're interested, I really do think there's a great opportunity out there for people from Kellogg with that business background to go and literally be like the second of two people at a startup, or the second of a few people, and play that business role. Whether that's stepping in as the CEO or chief operating officer maybe, but doing like all sorts of things, from literally like how are you going to get your accounting done? How are you going to get your insurance up and running? How are you going to pay people and all this stuff? Like if that's exciting to you to do a bunch of different things, I think there's neat opportunities more for that kind of thing than any one little function role at a company of a handful or a couple handfuls of people, compared to a larger company, if that makes sense.
I'll give an example. It's random that one of my wife's best friends went, and his brother was the brain PhD guy, and built something out of Seattle, and it's in the genomics space, basically using genomics to treat cancer, and it's beyond the comprehension of what I can even understand, and I have some knowledge of healthcare, and I didn't understand why he was moving to Seattle to go do this, but this guy was a real estate, basically, banker. I mean, that's what he was doing before this, but Wharton grad, not so good, but not to Kellogg, but he was Wharton grad, and he just knew business really well. He helped his brother basically take something, and it's one of the top 50 companies that Goldman's looking at that can change the way you can go in and go into cells and treat cancers and stuff like that. So he knew nothing about this, and honestly, I don't think he still does, but he knows how to market it, right? Because taking that complex thing and bringing it down to an investor so that they can understand it, it's important not to get caught in the details, because the details, no investor is going to have any comprehension of what that's really going to do. So you have to figure out how to market it, sell it, put the business plan in place, make sure you have the runway to do this, go get the right customers and manage those customers, negotiate the contracts. All that stuff has nothing to do with the actual product, right? It's all stuff that you learn in business school, or like legal documents, making sure you get the right contract in place to protect your IP or protect your business when you're signing a customer. So those are all things that I think, when you get the smart clinician that has something, they need a partner to get that stuff done. And it's a jack of all trades. I mean, even in a company we have 90 people, I think I'm still a jack of all trades. Whatever needs to get done that day, you have to be ready to do it. That's something that's an important skill set that if you're going to be an entrepreneur. Another piece of it was a question before is you have to have passion. Because if you don't have passion for that, you're not going to make it. Because if you're doing this because you just want to make a lot of money, which we all do, it's not enough. You need to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, that you believe in it, and it's going to make a difference, because it's a lot of work, and it's just the fact.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing
think about that. Like I mentioned, there's a whole curriculum of coursework to be able to do a lot of this stuff. And full disclosure, I'm less familiar with part-time programs, M, but less familiar with the part-time program. But you guys can take like a lot of these like discovery and intervention and all these classes. I think this is a great way to do it. These classes and this other set of all these other sets of entrepreneurship classes that kind of give you the opportunity to get your course credit, but also try out a business. And you're pressed for time, I get it. Like, you guys are the hardest working people because you have real jobs and you have to do Kellogg. Our jobs were like, work on our startup, go to Kellogg and get some beers at the TGI or TGF or whatever after class, so it was less of an issue. So you're busy. So I think taking advantage of these kind of classes where you can go and literally test out a business model, you have protected time to do that and see if there's anything there. I think that's awesome. And now I think I do honestly believe that Kellogg's entrepreneurship curriculum is best in class around the country. I really do believe that, because there's so many opportunities to get this experiential learning with your business and take it over the course of a number of classes. That's, I think, key, because you can discover your idea in one class, you can develop it in another, and then by the end of it all, if you really have something, you can pitch up one of these competitions and get $100, $200, couple $100,000 and make it real. You can quit your job, you know what I mean, and give it a real shot if you're bold enough to do that. And so, anyways, I think that's a really good avenue, is using the experiential coursework.
Go ahead.
Yes, specific to that vein that he was mentioning with NU New Venture Discovery, which I had no experience with either of those, but have heard good things. Key 911, KIEI, like the entrepreneurship department's 911 class, is a good way. I think regardless, if you don't have something in mind you want to start, it's a good way to see the kind of basics of the sort of business plan and pitch that you might want to generate in the future. If you already have an idea, then you can actually bring that idea to them and say, hey, I want to participate in this class as a student and a client, or just as a client if you want, and actually walk through it with them, and then you kind of, the deliverable for that class is essentially like a pitch deck, like you would use for Rice or something. So again, a good way to just get the basic framework of what people would be looking for in something like that.
And it goes without saying, the business plan competition too. If you think you have something, you can take it through the circuit too. I don't see why you couldn't, and see if you can't get it funded and take a shot at it.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you coursework because it's been a while since I've been at Kellogg, so I'm not going to be so good at there. But I'd say one thing I did do when I was at Kellogg, and I was working full time for my whole second year, just by nature of what I did in the summer, I had an opportunity to work for EVC for a year, and I just did both. Is just you pick what you really want to do. Don't follow into what someone's telling you to do. So I took classes that I exactly thought were things that were weak at, I didn't have any knowledge on, and just do that. Like, pick your plan. Doesn't matter what other people are thinking, because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, then take the opportunity to go and do the right things that you want to do, and don't worry about that you're supposed to take a strategy class and a marketing class. Just take the things that you're going to get the most out of, and spend time with those professors that are most engaged. Because they'll help you get to those right people. They'll make the introductions to the right people. And there's professors that are known for that and not known for that, and I would just take that guidance, because I did that. A couple of professors I still am in touch with, because I took those classes, I asked a lot of questions, spent a lot of time with them, and that was really helpful from that front. The other part of it you mentioned, Matter. I mean, I think looking at those things, time's pressed, but they have events that can work within the schedule there, and again, prioritizing. Getting to the right events that mean the most to you, because I know again, your time is pressed, so it's not easy. So I would just say, make sure you do and prioritize yourself, and not just kind of going through the process of getting a degree. And those courses you mentioned sound like the right kind of things to go to.
So we'll cut the questions now. We have the room till 6:30 though, so there's about 100 sandwiches back there need to get eaten, and they'll be around. You guys can come up and talk to them, ask any other questions you guys have. So go drink some water, eat some sandwiches.